Okay, with this tutorial, we're going to get more into cameras, lights, rendering, toggling pins, and power posing, just playing in general with transformations and morphs, and then saving renders. So this is kind of step two. So I've done everything I did in the last tutorial with Genesis. I've brought her just a basic clothes, changed the material. You can see here in my scene mode, what I'm selecting has the bounding box over it here. And again, I can go in here. But before I even go further, let's just talk about view modes. So let's go back to Genesis. And first we have, you can actually toggle here and see different view modes. If you just want a nice profile back view, you can easily toggle here. Like I said, you can do this one and you can kind of scroll over there as well. When you're in perspective view, you can go to these different highlighted viewpoints if you want to see underneath, over to the side. So pretty self-explanatory when you explore with that. So let's just go back to this mode. Let's take a look from here. And then over here, this little kind of sphere with a stripe, you can really look at different modes of your file here. So this one is just a bounding box, solid bounding box, and you can actually zoom around this. So if you were to break everything down into cubes, here's just a wireframe if you wanted to kind of understand it in this mode, and just to understand that it's essentially a mesh full of polygons. Smooth shaded, so if you just want it in black and white. Wire texture shaded, so it's got texture shading and the wire mesh. And then what the basic preset mode is texture shaded, which, and this is not what the render will look like, but this is just a workable a file for you. And then there's cartoon shaded if you wanted to do something like that as well. And then the last one is the render mode. So you can preview what your render is going to look like. I'm going to go back to texture shaded. You also have this to control different modes, and you can change your layout here in workspace, and you can also change your viewport layout. So there's all sorts of ways. And different styles. So you have a lot of, you can access your cart and wish list here in connecting with the store. Okay, so that's the first thing I wanted to go through here. The second thing is just posing in general. So let's just go over to and right now this is a great example. Nothing is selected, so there's no parameters coming up for posing, or no options coming up for posing. But when I click on, I can select it from here in posing, and I can also select it up here in the scene. So you can see that I can translate her. I can, bring her forwards and backwards. I can rotate her around with the y-axis if I want to, and then I can rotate her to the sides here with the z-axis. And then if I'm not happy with that, I can restore. I can just go over here and restore figure pose. You can do that from a lot of you can do that from a lot of spots too. So one of those spots is you can just go over here to edit, and then you go to figure, restore, and then you have all these options. Another way to do it is if you're playing around with different types of posing, you can also, when the gizmo is present, you can do that too, and I'll show you that in a second. Not the gizmo, but this control. So if you're using the selection tool to move an element, when you click on it, you can move it from here. So I'm turning the arm. And then you have that option with that little icon to restore figure pose. So that's a good handy little thing to have. And again, this, depending on what thing you're selecting, you can move this around. So another thing here in posing, if I click on the abdomen lower, I can play around with moving her, bending her slightly, moving her side to side. And so you just have to click on what area you want to move, or if it's her whole body, if you want to move. Now, if we're in the parameters pane over here, and we have the entire Genesis 8 figure selected, you can see that you can do more translations and literally move her across the plane if you want to. With the X, right and left. The Y, up and down. With the Z, forwards and backwards. Usually Z is up and down, so that's why it's a little confusing on this. Again, turn her around, and you can also scale her up if you want to make her a little bigger. And then, like before, you can always go over here, restore figure pose. So that, again, you can go to all different sections. So if I just want to make her abdomen bigger, or let's see if I want to make her, let's see, I'll click on her leg. See, I want to scale up her leg, just one leg. I have scaled up one leg. So you can control, and then you can also just restore the selected item. So let's say I just want to keep that abdomen a little bigger, want to give her a little more weight around the waist. You can do that. So that's another option. So with posing, another option for posing is this thing called Power Pose. And I've just opened it because it's not naturally in your, or automatically, I should say, in your panes. So you can go to Window, Panes / Tabs. So they're tabs and panes are the same thing. And then you can go to Power Pose. And you can drag, you can actually control the pose from this, moving the toes around. From this option, you can move, and then you can click on the head and move it around. Let's zoom in. I'm gonna pan and zoom, see what things do here. Let's rotate a little, see if we can actually, so it's making some more subtle adjustments in this particular, but essentially I'm just dragging things. Let's go back over here, and then, oh, you can actually move the nose around if I want to make it a little longer. I'm going to make her lip a little bigger, or move it around, make it a little less symmetrical. I mean, with Genesis, you get a super symmetrical figure that just has kind of a, I mean, it's very beautiful, but look, I can move the eyes. You can also play with individual fingers, bending them and moving them around. I was on the wrong hand. Again, you have to make sure when you get into this power pose mode that the actual figure is selected. You're going to play with bending. You want to grasp something. And then move the wrist a little. You can also go back over to this screen, this sphere, and move things around to where you want them, depending on what you want. And so it's just another method for posing your figure, and it's just another way to do that. And then there's one other aspect to posing, and again, you can go to restore if you want to. And you can put this plane over here if it's something you're going to be using a lot. And as you can see, the more you get into altering certain things, the more nodes are showing up, or bones. So you see that, and then you can go back in there and play with them and move them around. So really, definitely, you want to explore with all of this. And now we're going to go to one last element of posing. Okay, so in this case, I want to get over to the tool settings in order to play with pinning aspects of, similar to puppet warp, pinning parts of the body down so that when I move another part, the whole body doesn't move. So you need to go to Window, Panes, /tabs and go down to tool settings, which I did, and then you can drag that pane over to the side here. Now you have to be selected on something for anything to come up. When you go to tool settings, you go up in this little dialog, you can choose active pose. And so this is where we're going to start. I'm going to click on the shoulder and I'm going to click toggle pin. So right there, and I can choose if I wanted to pin it both, or I would prefer pinning both positions. I want to make it really strong. So that's an aspect you can choose. And then when I go to move something, I've got that pinned down so that this doesn't, and let me show you the difference. I'm going to unpin all. So the whole body is moving. So I don't want that. And I'm going to go over to, whoops. I'm going to go over to restore selected pose. Actually, I'm going to restore the whole figure. So let's try that again. And maybe, okay, so that's now pinned down. And now I'm going to move this part of the arm, and then it's not going to move the top of the arm. So let me turn to a different viewpoint, not that one. I'm going to go over to the side, then I'm going to pan so I can see this a little bit more and what I'm doing. Okay, so you can see it really controls, and you can clear the pin too. Another example is if you wanted to move just the calf and not the whole body, you're going to want to toggle some pins. And you still have to be mindful of this. And again, sometimes it's better to use this. It's a little slower. And then ultimately, and then let's unpin all, go over to scene. You can choose poses. You can choose a basic pose. And then you can then move that pose around if you'd like. Some of the poses are really funny. So, there's that option as well. So then the other thing we want to go to is shaping. Let's move this up. And there's a section for presets and a section for, let's move that up, and a section for the editor. And sometimes this menu gets a little funky, so I like to control it so I can really view what's in my scene, and if I'm trying to control certain things, I can do that. So I'm going to go back to just general Genesis, and we are in shaping, and we are in the editor. There's also presets, but it doesn't really have, anything for the presets for this particular one. That I think you would have to buy certain presets. Let's get a little closer. And then let's scale over here, rotate a little bit, just kind of look at her, and then zoom in and pan a little bit, just to get a little closer to her. Okay, so you can just, her general body, you can make her a little more of a bodybuilder. You can make her a little larger. As you can see, you start to get some holes in the fabric because that scale is not quite made for this fabric. And then you can go to her head shape. You can make her head a little larger. And then you've got all of these kind of options for the face that you can play around with. Nose bridge shape, playing all, with all of that. So, guess you can expand the shorts. Let's see, let's turn around and see what that does. Okay, so you expand the rear end size if you want. Widen the sides of the shorts. Really get some interesting things happening here. I guess This is the sports bra. So this is, you know, you can expand. I see. So those are all the things that we have. Okay, so the waist, we can play with that. I guess you can make a bigger belly button. Feet, you can make the feet larger. So this gets really fun for kind of just exaggerated things that you can do with the morphs and the shaping. And you can also, you can do actual head morphs or facial expression morphs. Now I've made her kind of exaggerated, and if I want to just restore her completely, I can do that by going over to restore, and there we go. So sometimes it won't let you just kind of go back. Now, if I want to play with face morphs, I go to posing. I want to play with the pose of the actual face, and I choose the head. That's the node I choose under Genesis Female. And I have all of these morphs. Now, if I want to make her sarcastic, in shock, smile, and of course that looks pretty odd. That looks kind of okay. But I can make her snarl, tired. So, I mean, you can really go and play with this, and some of them are really funny. Making her wink, closing her eyes, relaxing. So there's all sorts, and you can buy more morphs to play with as well. You know, you can really, and you can make her actually make I-E-I-O-U sounds, or shh, you know. There we go. Okay, so she's making a shush sound now. So you can try with filtering by context. You can play with different materials for her, different eyelash, different skin colors. I mean, they might not show up so much in the texture shader, but they might show up more in the actual renderer. So once we've, okay, so I think this is enough for this video. We're gonna have to move on to another video to kind of cover the next section. So we've really played with a number of things here. And now the next tutorial will go on to cameras and lights and rendering in more depth, because we're almost at 20 minutes here. So I hope this helps, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you do.